Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Fishing System in Food Wars World. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 71, The Riches from Spice Equation. Of course, Yuki's newly acquired vision wasn't just for replication. Now, he didn't need to physically touch the ingredients. With just a glance, he could know their specific data. Previously, when Yuki used the Raging Bull Blue Dragon Slash, he needed to touch the ingredient to confirm its internal structure before making the cuts, but now it was no longer necessary. Just a glance, and he'd know the ingredient's condition, allowing him to make the cuts directly. 2 months later, Tatsuki's term break was finally approaching. During this period, Yuki had 2 large bait fishing sessions, but only one item he caught was of particular use to him. Both large bait sessions yielded secret techniques from the world of Cooking Master Boy. The first was Tenwok Silver Chopstick Reversal. This secret technique allowed one to perfectly control 10 woks simultaneously, each cooking a completely different dish. With this technique, one could perfectly prepare 10 dishes at once. For others, such a secret technique was extraordinary. But for Yuki, this move was the least useful. With his current mastery of food honor, never mind 10 woks, even if given dozens, he could easily control them. So, this secret technique wasn't very useful to him. Its only real value was that it could be deconstructed. After being broken down, it contained many techniques for wok control and heat adjustment, which could be taught to Megumi and the others. The second large bait yielded the Spice Equation, which proved very useful for Yuki. After all, this ability was about further improving a finished dish. Using this secret technique, there was no need to worry that further adjustments would ruin the dish's flavors. It would only make them better. This was why Mira could easily defeat opponents. Replication plus further improvement didn't give the opponent any room to breathe. Besides using Spice Equation to improve dishes, it also greatly enhanced a chef's ability to use spices effectively. Keep in mind, Yuki had already used the Nakiri family's resources to try all known spices in the world. He was very familiar with them, and now, with the Spice Equation, it could be said that Yuki was the undisputed king of spices. After obtaining this secret technique, Yuki began experimenting. In just 3 days, Yuki created numerous secret sauces in the kitchen. Even the worst of these sauces could easily turn a small fast food restaurant into a large chain. Yuki's actions once again stunned the Polar Star residents. After all, normal people might spend their entire lives developing a single secret sauce, but Yuki created a whole batch in just 3 days. Even though they had seen Yuki perform countless incredible feats, they were still shocked by this one. It could only be said that the Spice Equation secret technique was simply broken. Looking at the various seasonings in front of him, Yuki wasn't going to let them go to waste. He immediately went to Jin Dojima, using Dojima's connections to contact the Sendawara sisters, Natsume and Ori, who had collaborations with Tatsuki. Yuki wasn't like Jun Shiomi, unknowingly sitting on a gold mine. He intended to use these sauces to earn a fortune. Yuki also didn't plan to follow Atsuya Aizen's path. Aizen started with fast food. If the business boomed, franchise requests would come flooding in. Aizen used this to earn significant profits and begin building the foundation of his business empire. Although Aizen was considered a villain in the original story, he was capable. And his talent and culinary skills among the Elite 10 should be ranked quite high. After all, after becoming an Elite 10 member, Aizen devoted most of his energy to building his business empire. He spent significantly less time on his culinary skills. In the eyes of others, Aizen's actions were without a doubt a waste of his talent. However, in Yuki's view, Aizen was actually quite smart. With Aizen's culinary skills, even if he didn't make any progress for the next year or two, he could still graduate easily, as he was already a senior chef. As long as a senior chef wasn't an idiot, graduating from Tatsuki was a straightforward matter. Aizen knew very well that his time as an Elite 10 member was only 2 years. During these 2 years, his access to resources was at its peak. Once he graduated and lost his Elite 10 title, everything would reset. Kojiro Shinomiya was the best example. At that time, even if he chose to stay in Japan, he could only do the same as other graduates, either opening a small restaurant or working for others. 2 years wasn't a long time in one's life. So, with his culinary skills being sufficient, Aizen began to build his business empire. Based on his progress, by the time he graduated, while his business empire wouldn't necessarily be complete, he'd at least have a solid foundation. At that time, he would have an advantage incomparable to other graduates. Perhaps even Jin Dojima, who immediately joined Tatsuki after graduating, wouldn't be able to compare to him. This was Aizen's shrewdness. Of course, Yuki didn't need to follow Aizen's path. Aizen only acted like this because his own abilities were insufficient. After all, he was just a senior chef. He was adept at developing seasonings. It was precisely because of this that other students called him the alchemist. However, such culinary skill would only work against subpar restaurants. So, he could only start with fast food, and fast food on a small scale at that. Yuki's abilities were far stronger than Aizen's, and his network was also far superior, so Yuki directly approached the Sendawara sisters. The Hobby Food Corporation in their hands was a massive enterprise. If it were Aizen, his recipes wouldn't stand out in such a large corporation, they would just be average. But Yuki, this king of spices, his creations were completely different. His recipes were completely unique. Using Jin Dojima's connections, Yuki brought the secret sauce recipes he developed directly to the Hobby Food Corporation. The person who met him was Natsume Sendawara. After all, it was Jin Dojima who pulled the strings. The weight this carried was naturally sufficient. Chapter 72, Becoming a Shareholder in Hobby Food Company. Natsume Sendawara naturally also knew about Yuki. Yuki's exploits were widely known in Japan, and the news had even started to spread internationally. Almost everyone believed Yuki would become a special-class chef in the future. Now Natsume Sendawara also intended to establish a good relationship with Yuki beforehand. Building a good relationship with a future special-class chef was a surefire winning strategy. After meeting and exchanging pleasantries, Yuki gave the sample secret sauce to Natsume Sendawara. He wasn't worried about Natsume Sendawara stealing the sauce and analyzing it. After all, his status and background were clear. His backing was sufficiently strong. As long as Natsume Sendawara wasn't a fool, she wouldn't do such a thing. Hiss. After tasting a bit, Natsume Sendawara's eyes lit up. The sisters had been immersed in the curry industry since they were little and were incredibly knowledgeable about spices. During the autumn elections, these two sisters were also invited to be judges. Actually, these two's status was a whole level above the other judges. It was precisely because of this that they didn't show the other judges any respect whatsoever. On the contrary, the other judges were quite apprehensive of them. The reason they could be invited to the autumn elections as judges wasn't entirely due to Atsuya Aizen's influence, but because of Tatsuki's reputation. The Nakiri family was the big player in the Japanese culinary scene, so the Sendawara sisters naturally also gave them face. After all, they still had collaborations going on. After just one bite, Natsume Sendawara knew that if this secret sauce were launched, it would be enough for their hub corporation to grab even more market share in both the curry and sauce industries. Originally, Natsume Sendawara didn't have particularly high expectations. Although Yuki was deemed a future special-class chef, he was still just a student. Her initial plan was to check the sauce's quality, and even if it didn't meet her expectations, she could use this to build a good relationship with Yuki in advance. But now, it seemed she was completely mistaken. The secret sauce in Yuki's hands was enough for their Hobby Food Corporation to continue expanding, occupying an even greater market share. She felt that, currently, no sauce on the market could compare with what Yuki had brought her. Yuki, how much does this sauce cost? After regaining her composure, Natsume Sendawara asked a crucial question. Although the secret sauce was truly delicious, they also needed to be clear about the cost. For a sauce, a more affordable price point was undoubtedly the best option. Of course, with the taste of this sauce, even a high-end approach would be very profitable. Yuki himself had naturally also considered this. This secret sauce used a large variety of spices, but those spices were all very inexpensive. Actually, Yuki also had some recipes for high-end sauces, but he didn't bring them along because the money earned from just one type was already more than enough for him to spend for several lifetimes. After learning about the sauce's cost, Natsume Sendawara immediately discussed the price with Yuki. Yuki wasn't good at negotiating prices, after all, his energy was focused on improving his culinary skills. So, he let Natsume Sendawara suggest a price herself. He also trusted that Natsume wouldn't rip him off. It wasn't blind confidence, he knew how powerful his backing was. After a moment of silence, Natsume Sendawara made a suggestion: Yuki could use this recipe to invest in Hobby Food Corporation, becoming a shareholder. For Yuki, this was also quite good. He didn't need to manage anything, he could just sit back and collect the money. As for whether his sauce would be defeated by products from other companies, that possibility was incredibly small, almost non-existent. After all, this was created by Yuki using the spice equation. And even if other companies, by some miracle, did develop a competing recipe, Yuki could just turn around and produce 10 even better ones. This king of spices wasn't just a title. After receiving the contract, Yuki forwarded a copy to Jin Dojima, who would have someone review it for him. Yuki, what on earth did you bring her? To make Sendawara Natsume cough up so much. Not long after he sent the contract, Jin Dojima called, his tone filled with surprise. He had reviewed the contract himself and also had the resort's legal team check it. There was indeed no problem, but the share percentage on the contract did shock Dojima. Just a pretty good sauce. I'll send you a sample later, Yuki said with a smile. Since Dojima said that, it meant Natsume Sendawara was indeed very sincere. Then I'll be looking forward to your secret sauce. After replying, Jin Dojima hung up the phone. He still had a lot of work to do at the resort. Yuki just needed to sign the contract. Yuki, it was a pleasure doing business with you. If you have any other new recipes in the future, feel free to bring them over. Natsume Sendawara said with a smile. At this moment, she was beaming. Although this sauce hadn't been tested in the market yet, with her discerning eye, she could naturally see how good its prospects were. This money tree, Yuki, the more she looked at him, the more pleasing he was to the eye. The pleasure was all mine, Miss Sendawara. Yuki also smiled, then left the Hobby Food Corporation. Although Natsume Sendawara wanted to treat Yuki to a meal, Yuki declined with an excuse. Natsume Sendawara didn't force him to stay because she was also eager to introduce this sauce to the market. The morning after Yuki returned to Polar Star, the list for the autumn elections was publicly released. All the Polar Star residents gathered in the square where the list was posted. Besides them, the other first-year students were also there. After all, this was the autumn election list. Those selected through the autumn elections could be considered Elite 10 candidates. After the current Elite 10 graduated, the new Elite 10. While it couldn't be said for certain that they would all come from these autumn election candidates, the probability was very high, at least 95% that Elite 10 seats would be occupied by them. Participants in the autumn elections were screened based on their performance throughout the entire term, unless someone deliberately hid their true skills for the entire semester. Most of the students were nervously watching the two covered boards that hadn't been unveiled yet. Just having one's name appear there meant they were among the first-year elites. The previous lessons and assessments were all internal to the school, but this time, it was the first time these students were facing the real world. Chapter 73, Everyone's Growth, Polar Star takes 1/6 of the spots. You two don't need to be so nervous. When the Polar Star residents arrived, Daigo Aoki and Shoji Sato were rather anxious. How can we not be nervous? Originally, this autumn election didn't really have anything to do with us too. But Yuki has been teaching us for so long, and our culinary skills have improved a lot. Now, it's very possible we'll make it onto this list, okay? Daigo Aoki exclaimed. If they had known from the beginning they had no chance of being on the list, they wouldn't be nervous and would simply come with the mentality of watching a show. In the original story, these two were exactly like that. Their skills weren't up to par, so they weren't selected. But things were completely different now thanks to Yuki's intervention. Yuki had taught them many things, and while teaching, his food honor had also been constantly improving. The Polar Star residents were now much stronger than their original counterparts, including Daigo and Shoji. It was a sure thing that the others would make it onto the list. Now, only these two were still uncertain. As everyone talked, the list was soon revealed. There it is. Our names are on the list. The entire Polar Star dorm made it into the autumn elections. Daigo Aoki quickly scanned the list and found everyone's names. Everyone? Daigo Aoki's loud voice was also heard by the surrounding students, and this undoubtedly stunned the vast majority. The autumn elections only had 60 participants. The number of students who survived the Tatsuki Resort training camp was over 600, and almost no students who passed the training camp were eliminated from the normal curriculum. So, the chances of being on this list were less than 1 in 10. Not really surprising. After all, this is Polar Star, where only the best of the best can stay. Such a pity you can't even apply to get in anymore. Many students, after their initial shock, weren't really surprised. Because of Yuki, Megumi, and Satoshi Ishiki, even before entering high school, other students already wanted to get into Polar Star. Unfortunately, joining Polar Star was very difficult. Although Daigo Aoki and Shoji Sato were now residents, back then, in order to join Polar Star, they had spent a great deal of time and endured countless failures before finally succeeding. Others didn't have such perseverance and naturally couldn't make it. And since admissions to Polar Star had been closed off, they no longer accepted new residents. Truly a pity. But this time, the first place spot is already decided, isn't it? With that monster around, everyone else can only compete for second place. One student looked toward Yuki. Everyone had witnessed Yuki's performance during the training camp. Even Irina Nakiri, an Elite 10 member, was completely outmatched. So, in this autumn election, Yuki would undoubtedly be the champion. Everyone else could only fight for second place. After confirming everyone from Polar Star had made the list, the group dispersed. This time, 11 members from Polar Star had made it into the autumn elections. One dormitory occupied more than 1/6 of the entire list. It could only be said that Polar Star's reputation was continuing to grow. Fumio Daimido, upon learning this news, was naturally beaming. She was the one who most hoped for the return of Polar Star's golden age. It seemed like this current generation might restore Polar Star to its former glory, perhaps even surpass it. After returning to Polar Star, everyone held a party. Yuki also brought out some Toriko ingredients he had fished out using small bait. Seeing these ingredients, everyone's eyes lit up. After all, they had tasted them before and knew how delicious they were. Too bad Yuki didn't bring them out often, so opportunities to enjoy them were rare. Yuki also didn't need to worry about the dishes for the party, others would take care of it. This was mainly due to these ingredients' special nature. For chefs, they were like obtaining divine weapons. So, they would fight over who got to cook these ingredients. Yuki was naturally happy to let them do so. To celebrate all of us entering the autumn election preliminaries, cheers! Even Fumio Daimido, who rarely joined such gatherings, was present this time. In the past, she would only provide some food but wouldn't participate personally. She would say that she was too old and couldn't hang with the youngsters anymore. But this time was different. She felt as if she was seeing a revival of the golden age and naturally joined the celebration. Congratulations, everyone! With your skills, you guys might just sweep the top 8 spots in this autumn election. Fumio Daimido said excitedly. And she had a point. In the original story, although only Soma Yukihara and Megumi Tadakaro from Polar Star made it into the top 8, the others weren't far behind. After Yuki's special training, their culinary skills had improved significantly. Moreover, Alice Nakiri and Ryo Korakiba, who would have been in the top 8 in the original story, were both at Polar Star now. This way, there were already 5 who were sure to enter the top 8: Yuki, Soma, Ryo, Megumi, and Alice. As for the remaining 3 spots, 2 of them could probably be secured. The last spot, however, had some uncertainty, as its competitor was Akira Hayama. Akira Hayama himself was very strong and had an extraordinary sense of smell, not to mention that the theme of this assessment was also what he was best at. So, defeating Hayama would be difficult. But regardless, this autumn election was destined to become Polar Star's stage. Even if Akira Hayama made it into the top 8, he would just be a side character. The next month was a break. Yuki didn't intend to keep everyone at the dorm for further training. They all had their own things to do. If this 1 month was utilized effectively, then Akira Hayama wouldn't even have a chance of making it into the top 8. The next morning, the theme for the autumn elections was delivered to each dormitory. Everyone saw the theme. This time, it's curry. Isn't that Yuki's forte? Everyone immediately looked at Yuki. They all clearly remembered that after Yuki learned the spice equation, he constantly tinkered with various spices, and in just a few days, had created numerous secret sauces. It is my specialty, but I'm not giving you guys the finished product. You need to do your own research. If you have any questions, you can ask me, Yuki said. Everyone nodded in agreement. They were all skilled chefs and naturally understood this point. Although they had been studying under Yuki's guidance for a long time now, they weren't dependent on Yuki. When Yuki was teaching, he didn't just stuff them full of various techniques and knowledge. He also had them raise questions and solve problems independently. So, this group wasn't just a bunch of babies relying on Yuki. By the way, the spices I have in the kitchen, you guys can use them freely. My spice collection here should be the most complete, Yuki said. These spices were all collected from all over the world using the Nakiri family's connections. In terms of variety, his collection here was even more complete than Jun Shiomi's. Yuki himself didn't need these things now. The autumn elections, for him, were just a formality. If he participated, the championship was already his. With Yuki's permission, everyone picked their preferred spices from Yuki's collection. Then came the term break. Yuki, where are you planning to go for vacation? Alice Nakiri asked. She still hadn't given up on pursuing Yuki, so she asked about his plans for the break. Vacation, huh? I'm going to stay at the Shokian Ryokan for a while. I've been working hard on my cooking, it's time for a proper break, Yuki stated. He was getting closer and closer to first-class chef. He had also been continuously researching soul-soothing esoterica. But for an entire semester, he had been pushing himself to improve his culinary skills, so he planned to relax for a bit now. Going to the Shokian Ryokan for vacation was a good choice. There, he could go on boat trips, and not far away, there was also a beach, plus relatively untouched mountains and forests. This world, after all, was centered around cuisine, completely different from the normal world. So, the environment was still very good, no need to worry about pollution or anything. Shokian? If I'm not mistaken, that's Megumi's family inn, right? Alice Nakiri said after some thought. That's right, the Shokian Ryokan is my family's inn and restaurant. Megumi Tadakoro quickly nodded. Can I come too? Alice Nakiri pointed at herself and asked. The Shokian was Megumi's family's place. Although she could go there directly as a guest without asking for permission, to avoid leaving a bad impression, it was still better to ask clearly. Sure. Megumi Tadakoro, not having any ulterior motives, agreed almost without a second thought. Me too. Me too. Going on vacation without me? How could you? Yoshino Yuki immediately joined in. During this period, they would continue Yuki's lessons after their normal classes. Although their culinary skills were improving rapidly, it was also truly tiring. So, hearing that Yuki and the others planned to vacation at Shokian, Yoshino Yuki also wanted in. Since you're all going, can I also tag along? When Ryoko Sakaki heard about it, she also directly joined in. The other Polar Star residents also followed suit. In the end, except for 5 people, everyone else from Polar Star planned to go to Shokian. These five were Satoshi Ishiki, Soma Yukihira, Ryo Korakiba, Daigo Aoki, and Shoji Sato. Satoshi Ishiki wasn't staying behind because he didn't want to go. He was staying because, as an Elite 10 member, the autumn elections were the responsibility of the Elite 10. There was also other work for the next semester. Except for Rindo Kobayashi, all the other Elite 10 members were very busy. This was also the reason Yuki didn't plan to become an Elite 10 member. Although there were certain privileges, it was truly a lot of work when things got busy. He didn't want to deal with that. Soma Yukihira and Ryo Korakiba planned to stay in the dormitory. One reason was that the variety and quantity of spices here were the most abundant. Although they could take some with them, staying here was undoubtedly the best. No one was surprised that these two chose to stay. They were hardcore cooking fanatics. After getting to know them for a while, everyone even suspected they might be long-lost brothers. There were just too many similarities. And these two had also hit it off with each other. Although at first, Soma Yukihira was no match for Ryo Korakiba. But Soma Yukihira's growth rate was extremely fast, especially when facing immense pressure, and Ryo Korakiba was undoubtedly the one applying the pressure. Under Ryo's pressure, even without the beating from failing the breakfast assessment, Soma's growth rate didn't slow down at all. He even gradually caught up, which also gave Ryo a sense of crisis, desperately pushing his own potential. These two were now deathly afraid of falling behind each other, so they were working themselves to the bone. As for Daigo Aoki and Shoji Sato, they had a good sense of self-awareness. They knew there was a large gap between their talent and the others at Polar Star. And they also knew that being able to enter the autumn election preliminaries this time was mainly thanks to Yuki's efforts. So, they planned to stay at Polar Star and continue to improve their culinary skills. Since their talent was inferior to others, then they would double their efforts. These two didn't lack perseverance, otherwise, they wouldn't have gotten into Polar Star in the first place. These five remained, while the others all planned to go to Shokian Ryokan. Megumi Tadakoro had also notified her family beforehand that Yuki and the others would be visiting, and she had already reserved rooms. As vacation began, the group set off with much fanfare. Irina-sama, it seems Alisoju and the others have gone on vacation. Should we also go? Hisako Orato knew how important Yuki was to the god's tongue, so she had also been trying to find ways to build a good relationship with him. But unfortunately, not being at Polar Star, the opportunities to interact weren't many. Let's not. After thinking for a moment, Irina Nakiri decided to give up. One reason was that as an Elite 10 member, she had many things to do. Her schedule was quite full. It wasn't ideal to adjust it on short notice. The other reason was that she still couldn't let go of her facade. So, she chose to give up. As expected of the Nakiri family, this limo is amazing. On the way to the Shokian Ryokan, the group was riding in a stretch limo arranged by Alice Nakiri. As the young lady of the Nakiri family, arranging such a private car was almost too easy. Yoshino Yuki, taking such a car for the first time, was like a curious child, touching everything here and there. The others were also very interested in this limo. They had never ridden in one before, including Yuki. Whether it was his previous life or this one, he had only ever seen such cars on TV before. Chapter 74, Vacation at the Shokian Ryokan, Megumi's Monkfish Show. Seeing everyone so excited, Alice Nakiri also smiled. At this age, it was also the age to show off, and Alice Nakiri didn't hide it at all, directly expressing whatever emotions she had. This was also why Irina Nakiri envied Alice. Alice could cry openly in front of everyone after failing, completely disregarding the surrounding environment and her own status. This kind of carefree attitude was something Irina truly envied. With the limo ride, the group arrived at the Shokian Ryokan. Since Megumi had notified her family beforehand, everyone at the inn came out to help carry their luggage. However, when they saw their daughter stepping out of such a luxurious car, they were all stunned. But after Megumi explained, they understood the reason. This was because Alice Nakiri, the young lady of the Nakiri family, was present. Here in Japan, and especially in the restaurant and in industry, they knew very well the Nakiri family's position. Seeing her family so tense, Megumi Tadokoro did her best to reassure them, and they gradually calmed down. After their luggage was taken upstairs, everyone gathered in the main hall to discuss their itinerary.
It's getting quite late today. Tomorrow, we can go on a picnic in the mountains, Megumi Tadokoro suggested.
The area around the Shokian was rather rural, with a pretty nice environment, so she planned to take everyone to the mountains tomorrow. In the next few days, they could also go out to sea for some fishing, some diving, and play on the beach. In short, there were quite a few activities.
Megumi, you used to do the Tadokoro monkfish show here at the Shokian, didn't you? We still haven't seen it yet, Yoshino Yuki couldn't help but say. Only Yuki had seen Megumi Tadokoro's monkfish show, as everyone returned to their own homes during vacations. Only Yuki had gone to the Shokian Ryokan with Megumi and seen her performance. Monkfish show. Hearing these words, Megumi Tadokoro became somewhat uneasy. If it were a performance for regular guests, it was fine. But performing for acquaintances, that was an entirely different matter. That's right. Only Yuki has seen it. And he keeps talking about how amazing it was back then, Ryoko Sakaki said with a smile. Unable to withstand everyone's persuasion, Megumi eventually agreed. However, agreeing didn't mean they could see the show tonight. After all, ingredients were a factor. That's easy, leave it to me. Alice Nakiri made a phone call. With the Nakiri family's extensive network and local industry, getting an extra-large monkfish delivered from the docks was a simple task. Although Alice and Megumi were love rivals, Megumi Tadokoro was completely unaware of this. Moreover, Alice wouldn't use underhanded tactics against Megumi. If there was going to be competition, it would be fair and square. She wouldn't stoop to dirty tricks. Alice would also often help everyone. Coming from the wealthy Nakiri family, she had plenty of ways to help everyone. Precisely because of this, everyone had a very good impression of her. The power of money, I wish I had that superpower. Seeing Alice Nakiri solve the problem with a single phone call, Yoshino Yuki was incredibly envious. Keep working hard, Yuki, and one day your dreams might come true. Ryoko Sakaki smiled at her friend. Although she was also somewhat envious, she wouldn't say it out loud, unlike Yoshino Yuki, who, with close acquaintances, was an open book. As everyone chatted, Megumi Tadokoro went to prepare the tools. Her family, after hearing about what Alice had done, were also very surprised. Truly, rich people were different. They didn't even bat an eye at the cost, ordering a 10-kilogram monkfish and even having it delivered by special car. However, they also actively helped Megumi Tadokoro prepare the tools. After all, Megumi's performance was a Shokian Ryokan specialty. Since a dedicated car was used to deliver the fish from the docks, the ingredients arrived soon. What a huge monkfish! This is the biggest I've ever used for a performance. Looking at the giant monkfish before her, Megumi Tadokoro was quite surprised. The Shokian Ryokan's performance was to attract customers, so the monkfish they usually prepared wouldn't be this big. But this one was brought here by the superpower of money. Naturally, its size was huge. However, for Megumi, it wasn't much of a problem. Although the size was much larger, its internal structure wouldn't be too different. Yuki also glanced at it. After confirming that the internal structure wasn't affected by its immense size, he didn't say anything. And so, in front of everyone, Megumi Tadokoro began the Tadokoro monkfish show. Hearing that Megumi was back and would be performing, the other guests at the Shokian Ryokan also gathered to watch. Megumi was now completely focused. While the knife in her hand couldn't compare to Yuki's Raging Bull Blue Dragon slash, her movements were decisive, not a single hesitation or mistake. Even with the monkfish being much larger than normal, she could precisely locate all the key parts. The entire dissection process was smooth and elegant. It could only be said that all of Megumi Tadokoro's hard work had paid off. After Megumi finished, the audience erupted in applause. And no wonder Yuki keeps going on about it. Megumi's monkfish show is a feast for the eyes. That technique is flawless. I even recorded it. Ryoko Sakaki exclaimed. Megumi's performance was genuinely impressive. Seriously amazing.
You can tell this is the result of years of hard work. Even Alice Nakiri, despite seeing Megumi as a rival in love, had to admire her skills. Even though you haven't done the Monkfish show for a semester, you're still very proficient. While there were some minor slips, they didn't really matter.
Yuki gave Megumi a thumbs up. However, in his eyes, Megumi Tadakoro's performance had quite a few flaws.
This was the benefit of enhanced vision, any mistakes were immediately apparent.
Yuki then directly pointed out Megumi's flaws to her. Being so straightforward wouldn't discourage Megumi.
Megumi was mentally very strong now, such words would only help her remember those areas for improvement.
Her technique looked perfect to me. Are there really that many problems?
Yoshino Yuki asked, bewildered. It was as if they hadn't even watched the same performance. It's normal that you couldn't tell, these flaws were very minor and didn't have much overall impact. Of course, if you use this kind of presentation in a high-level shokuchiki, then those details become crucial.
Yuki explained.
The more skilled the chef, the more precise their control over details. Often, it was these minor missteps that decided victory or defeat in high-stakes shokuchikis.
Naturally, everyone wouldn't doubt Yuki's judgment.
Megumi herself was the most aware of this. After Yuki pointed out those areas for improvement, Megumi reviewed her own performance and also realized there were indeed some imperfections. As for others, those were things she couldn't even notice herself, but she would correct them according to Yuki's standards.
After memorizing these issues, Megumi took the cut monkfish to the kitchen.
This monkfish would be used for dishes, of course, for Yuki and the Polar Star residents. While the other guests were eager to try it, after learning that the ingredient was provided by Megumi's family, they could only shake their heads helplessly. They couldn't just procure a monkfish at a time like this, and besides, tonight's performance was over.
Even if they brought a monkfish, Megumi Tadakoro wouldn't do another show.
This monkfish was very large, and Megumi had expended a lot of energy, she couldn't handle another one. After all, Megumi was just a delicate girl.
After dinner, everyone went to take a bath. Yuki didn't go with them, he didn't like bathing with a large group of people, so he used a single-person room.
After showering, everyone gathered again in Zenji Marui's room.
Why do you always have to come to my room, even for vacations?
Zenji Marui said in exasperation. They always used his room in the dormitory, and they even did the same last time during the training camp. Now, even when on vacation, they still wouldn't let him off.
It's a habit now. Since we're all here, let's just have fun. Saying that, Yoshino Yuki took out a deck of cards. Since it was too late tonight, they could only play some simple indoor games, and poker was naturally the best choice. Seeing the cards, Yuki was somewhat amused. Keep in mind, his current vision was leagues above everyone else's, and he could clearly see the subtle differences on these cards. I'll shuffle. Yuki, using this as a chance, directly memorized every single card in the deck. Now, he knew what everyone was holding. It had to be said, this evolving vision ability was truly powerful, completely broken in all aspects. Since there were too many people, they divided into two groups. When playing cards, there naturally had to be a wager. But their wager was simple: losers had to stick a paper strip on their foreheads. As the cheat player, Yuki couldn't help but grin. Although the cards in everyone's hands were face down, he already knew exactly what they were. After some quick calculations, he knew exactly how to win. Thus began Yuki's poker winning streak. And every victory was swift and decisive. In just one short hour, Megumi Tadakoro, Alice Nakiri, and Yoshino Yuki all had paper strips plastered all over their foreheads. This makes no sense. We played so many rounds, and Yuki won every single time. You must be cheating, Yoshino Yuki said, looking at Yuki with suspicion. The other two had the same look. Yuki's performance was just too outrageous. From the start until now, in 1 hour, in fast rounds, it took Yuki less than a minute to play his hand. And even in slower rounds, it only took a few minutes.
In 1 hour, they played more than 20 rounds, and Yuki won every time.
This was clearly abnormal. This isn't cheating.
You guys shuffled the cards, and you guys dealt the cards.
I didn't even touch them, how could I possibly cheat? Yuki said, indicating that his cheat couldn't possibly be considered cheating. Is Yuki that good? How about we switch teams? Zenji Marui looked at Yuki with some suspicion.
At his request, Yuki joined their team, but soon, Zenji Marui and the others were also utterly defeated, left doubting their existence.
Yuki winning every round was one thing, it was the speed that blew their minds. It was as if Yuki knew what cards they had and how they would play, easily winning every single hand. The fastest round was when Yuki got a straight flush and directly played his hand in one go. The entire round lasted less than 10 seconds. You're definitely using some kind of trick, aren't you, Yuki? There's no way anyone can win this many times in a row. Alice Nakiri couldn't help but exclaim.
Although she didn't know how he did it, Yuki definitely had a trick up his sleeve. Otherwise, with this win rate, she felt Yuki could win the lottery.
Actually, it's simple. All you need to do is memorize the cards.
When I shuffled the cards in the beginning, I already memorized every single one, so even when they're in your hands, I still know what you have.
Then, it's just some simple calculations to know what you will play. Yuki explained with a smile.
Upon hearing these words, the room became completely silent.
Memorized the cards? Memorized so many cards in such a short time? Are you some kind of super brain? Even the usually quiet Shun Ibusaki couldn't help but interject.
That speed of memorization was simply too fast.
I've seen some speed memorization shows, those folks are crazy fast at memorizing. But that kind of memory only lasts for a short period. Alice Nakiri said. Yuki's technique was way above those memory masters.
After all, Yuki's memorization lasted for over an hour. Although those memory masters could memorize in a short time, they would forget after a while.
Not to mention Yuki was also calculating the order of play continuously. This completely blew their minds.
It could only be said, as expected of Yuki, not only was his cooking skills extraordinary, but he was also ridiculous in other aspects as well.
Chapter 75, Special Bamboo Chicken, Triple Scent Bomb.
After learning about Yuki's insane card counting skills, everyone quickly kicked Yuki out of the game.
They were all normal players, only Yuki was playing with cheats. And there was nothing they could do about it. After all, this was Yuki's own ability. He wasn't outwardly cheating, he only memorized the cards and calculated. Yuki just chuckled about this. He had already won enough, the paper strips on their faces were proof of that. While crushing noobs was indeed fun, doing it repeatedly did get boring.
So, Yuki just played on his phone, occasionally glancing at their card game. After playing for a while, everyone started to feel sleepy and returned to their respective rooms.
The night passed uneventfully. Early next morning, Megumi Tadakoro and her family had already prepared everything for the picnic. After everyone was ready, they followed Megumi into the mountains. Although the mountain forests around Megumi's hometown were well preserved, there was barely any wildlife left. However, the scenery was quite beautiful, and it was also the season when wild mushrooms were abundant. While these wild mushrooms couldn't compare to those from Kyoto, there were still quite a few. Alice, that one in your hand is poisonous. Don't eat it. Following Megumi's lead, everyone was searching for wild mushrooms in the mountains.
This was an experience Alice Nakiri had never had before, and there were also several wild mushrooms here that Alice didn't recognize. Not just Alice Nakiri, but others would occasionally pick up a poisonous mushroom. Yuki, Zenji Marui, and Megumi constantly watched over them, making sure no poisonous wild mushrooms were taken back. Megumi Tadakoro lived here all year round, so she was naturally quite familiar with the local mushrooms. Zenji Marui, possessing a lot of knowledge, could also judge whether the wild mushrooms were toxic based on that knowledge.
As for Yuki, it was even simpler for him. With a glance, he knew the condition of these mushrooms.
Although he didn't recognize some of them, based on the feedback from his evolving vision, he could tell if they contained any harmful substances. Under their supervision, most of the wild mushrooms in everyone's hands were discarded. It's quite dangerous to forage for wild mushrooms in a place like this by yourself. There are so many varieties, and most of them are toxic. An hour later, everyone sat down to rest and gathered the wild mushrooms they picked. These mushrooms in their hands were only a small portion of what they had collected. As for the rest, they were all toxic mushrooms and had already been discarded. Yoshino Yuki now felt rather apprehensive. If not for people familiar with these mushrooms keeping watch, taking these things back could have fatal consequences. And there are many poisonous mushrooms that look almost exactly like edible ones. I have no idea how you guys can even tell them apart. Alice Nakiri couldn't help but complain. There were some that looked exactly the same to her, but in the eyes of Yuki, Zenji, and Megumi, there were poisonous and non-poisonous ones mixed together. Anyway, she really couldn't distinguish them. It's your first time seeing these mushrooms, so it's natural you can't tell the similar-looking ones apart. This requires experience. After a while, you'll naturally also know how to differentiate them. Yuki said. Distinguishing some wild mushrooms required paying attention to minor details. Those with experience could tell at a glance, while those without would be completely clueless. After playing around for a bit more, it was finally lunchtime. Led by Megumi Tadakoro, everyone came to a bamboo forest. Beside the bamboo forest was a grassy area, and there was also a small stream, the perfect place for a picnic. The environment here is really nice. If only it were the right season. We could dig up some bamboo shoots. Shunibusaki said, looking at the bamboo forest beside them. Such a large bamboo grove, if it were the right season, he reckoned they could find many bamboo shoots. Even though there aren't any bamboo shoots, there's still bamboo. And there are enough materials here. I'll make some tasty treats for you guys. After glancing at the bamboo forest, Yuki immediately grabbed a machete and went towards the bamboo grove. Everyone began to prepare the things they'd need later on, looking curiously at Yuki. Yuki, having arrived at the edge of the bamboo forest, selected a stalk of bamboo he needed and started to cut. Thanks to Food Honor, and with his Food Honor having improved greatly now, Yuki's single cut landed precisely at the bamboo's weakest point. Like a hot knife through butter, the bamboo was instantly severed. And the cut was incredibly smooth, like a mirror surface. If it were anyone else, although chopping down a stalk of bamboo wasn't a problem, it would still take some effort. But for Yuki, it was exceedingly simple. The machete swiftly moved, and the fallen bamboo was cut into small sections by Yuki. And Yuki didn't waste the leaves on the bamboo either, collecting them all. Is Yuki going to make bamboo rice? Everyone asked curiously after seeing the bamboo sections Yuki brought back. They had naturally heard of bamboo rice. Some will be for bamboo rice. As for the rest, I'm making another dish, Yuki said as he put down the materials and went towards the creek. There was another ingredient he needed here. After looking around for a bit, Yuki found the soil he needed, dug out some, and piled it on the side of the stream. After washing his hands, he returned to where everyone was and began to choose ingredients. With Yuki's actions, everyone also knew what he planned to make. Besides bamboo rice, Yuki was going to make beggar's chicken. P.S. Beggar's chicken is a chicken stuffed, wrapped in clay and lotus leaves, or bamboo leaves as alternatives, and baked slowly using low heat. They just happened to have brought a chicken today. However, the beggar's chicken Yuki made was different from the usual kind. Yuki used the 7-star knives to split 2 of the bamboo sections into thin strips, then deboned the chicken. And inserted the bamboo strips into the chicken, using bamboo as a substitute for the chicken bones. After which, he marinated the chicken with various spices. After finishing this, Yuki took the chicken to the riverside, wrapped it in the previously cleaned bamboo leaves, and then coated it with a layer of mud. After this step, Yuki didn't bother digging a pit or finding firewood because it wasn't necessary. His inferno could let him directly cook the beggar's chicken barehanded. Terrifying flames instantly engulfed the beggar's chicken in Yuki's hands, turning it into a fireball. At this moment, Yuki looked like a mage from a movie, holding a ball of fire. For Beggar's Chicken, heat control was the most crucial and also the most difficult part to manage. After all, cooking an entire chicken wasn't an easy task. If the heat was even a bit too strong, even if the chicken was wrapped in tin foil, it would end up burnt. If the heat wasn't enough, the chicken would be undercooked. And during the cooking process, the chef couldn't determine the chicken's condition. This was different from other dishes. When preparing other dishes, to ensure the heat was just right, one could taste it themselves, observe changes in the ingredients, or use other tools. But Beggar's Chicken was different. Wrapped in a thick layer of mud, it was very difficult for a chef to judge the condition of the ingredients inside. Although technology was advanced now, and there were many tools available, if the mud and the leaves protecting the Beggar's Chicken were damaged, then the aroma would naturally be lost. However, for Yuki, who had Inferno, this was very simple. Plus, with his evolving touch and vision, he had a clear understanding of the ingredients' condition inside the mud. Under the flame's searing heat, the outer mud quickly dried up. The heat spread through the mud and bamboo leaves to the chicken inside. The fragrance of bamboo from the outer bamboo leaves slowly permeated the ingredients. And because Yuki had replaced the chicken bones with bamboo strips, the bamboo strips inside also released their unique fragrance. These two aromas, paired with the seasonings Yuki had used to marinate the chicken, created a chemical reaction. The deliciousness was continuously developing within the mud. The Beggar's Chicken in Yuki's hands had become a super scent bomb. Seeing that it was almost done, Yuki also withdrew the flames. The steaming mud ball still radiated heat, even the surrounding air seemed to distort slightly. But such high temperatures, for Yuki with his Inferno, were nothing. Yuki didn't immediately break open the mud, letting the ingredients inside continue to simmer would make the flavor even better. During this period, Yuki began making bamboo rice. Making bamboo rice was even simpler. As long as there were enough ingredients, Yuki could whip it up in minutes. Yuki's actions were too fast, while others were still preparing, the dishes on his side were already complete. To avoid missing the optimal time for eating, everyone temporarily stopped what they were doing and gathered around the picnic blanket. Looking at their expectant gazes, Yuki directly tapped the mud ball with his hand. It was just a light tap, but the next second, the mud ball completely shattered. This was the effect of skillful force exertion using food honor. The force instantly spread throughout the entire mud ball, so with just this one tap, the mud ball before him shattered. Such a move once again caught everyone's attention. Yuki's light tap was simply too cool. The girls' eyes lit up with little stars, the boys looked at Yuki like he was their boss. So fragrant. Even though it's still wrapped in bamboo leaves, the fragrance is already this intense. Looking at the Beggar's Chicken still wrapped in bamboo leaves, everyone was practically drooling. The moment the mud shattered, the sealed aroma burst out. It's like a fragrance bomb just went off. Everyone was mesmerized by this smell. Don't get too excited yet, that's not all. As Yuki spoke, he unwrapped the outer layer of bamboo leaves. The moment the bamboo leaves were opened, an even richer fragrance erupted from inside, like a second scent bomb. At this moment, no one spoke. They were afraid that speaking would make them drool. The effect of the second fragrance bomb was clearly even more powerful. And now for the third. The moment Yuki's 7-star knife cut into the chicken, the third scent wave exploded. A triple-layered scent bomb, each layer more fragrant and more enticing than the last. The unique aroma of the bamboo leaves and bamboo strips blended perfectly with the seasonings, creating an even more exceptional fragrance. Yuki's 7-star knives swiftly moved, and the chicken was cut into smaller pieces. Although eating Beggar's Chicken was best done by tearing it apart with your hands, there were too many people now, and there was only one chicken, so Yuki could only cut it into smaller pieces. After this step, Yuki brought out the bamboo rice. The moment he cut open the bamboo, a fresh fragrance also wafted out, though it was completely masked by the triple scent bomb of the Beggar's Chicken before. Fragrance bombs. This idea is amazing. Yoshino Yuki's eyes lit up. The theme for this autumn election was curry. Basically, it was about using various spices, and scent bombs were undoubtedly a good choice.
Both Soma Yukihira and Akira Hayama used this strategy in the original story. Continuous fragrance bombs indeed impressed both the students and the judges. You're right, fragrance bombs can be very effective when used well. Shane Busaki, specializing in smoked cuisine, naturally also had a different understanding of aroma. Hearing this, everyone felt a little tempted. While it's true that fragrance bombs can leave a strong impression, too many people using the same tactic would be repetitive. The more discerning the judges are, the less effective this becomes, Alice Nakiri cautioned. Although a good idea, if overused, the judges would get tired of it. Actually, you can all use fragrance bombs, and you can even combine them. Yuki revealed his thoughts. Hearing this, everyone felt eager to try it. After all, they were all from the same dormitory and didn't want to see anyone eliminated. I'll contact the others and see what they think. Yoshino Yuki immediately took out her phone and called those who stayed at Polar Star. In the end, everyone agreed. Soma Yukihira and Ryo Korakiba were very interested in this approach. As for the other two, being carried was naturally the best outcome. Chapter 76, Alice Nakiri's Cash Power, Lament of the Fisherman. Now that everyone agrees, we can work according to this method. But because we're split into two areas, the dishes we'll make will need to be adjusted accordingly. Yuki said. Then, everyone made plans. There were two areas. Group A with Soma Yukihira, Ryo Korakiba, Shane Busaki, Zenji Marui, and Ryoko Sakaki. As for Group B, Yuki, Megumi Tadakoro, Alice Nakiri, Yoshino Yuki, Daigo Aoki, and Shoji Sato. The distribution was pretty balanced. This grouping is pretty good. Everyone's culinary skills are quite strong, with Soma and Ryo leading the way in Group A. As for Group B, while Daigo and Shoji's skills are a bit weaker, with me there, that won't be a problem. Yuki's participation in the autumn elections meant an almost guaranteed victory. For him, it was like playing against newbies. And simply crushing them was no fun. So, he'd do something more interesting, take the entire Polar Star crew into the top 8. Now things would get interesting, 11 people in the top 8. That would surely make everyone watching the autumn elections scratch their heads. Let's call this plan Operation Polar Star Domination. Yoshino Yuki excitedly gave this plan a name. Great! We now have the framework and the name. I'll work out the details. For this plan, all of you will return to Polar Star for the last 10 days of vacation. After all, a plan like this requires practice and coordination, Yuki said. Naturally, no one had any objections. They couldn't wait to see their plan succeed, picturing how the autumn elections would become Polar Star's personal stage. After finishing their discussions, everyone turned their attention to the food, the current main attraction. The refreshing aroma of the bamboo, blending with the spices, creates a unique fragrance, and it complements the flavor of the chicken so well. And this unbeatable texture. It's so good. Only after eating did everyone realize that the earlier scent bomb had been merely an introduction. The key was still the taste of the dish itself. Soon, the chicken and bamboo rice before them were completely devoured. Although the chicken portion was substantial, after being divided among them, it wasn't enough. But Yuki couldn't do much about that now. It wasn't that he didn't want to make more, but he had run out of ingredients here. So, he could only wait to eat the dishes the others made. Soon, everyone brought out the dishes they had prepared. Alice Nakiri had now also started learning chukariori from Yuki. This didn't mean she had abandoned molecular gastronomy, just shifted its position from primary to secondary. The reason was simple: molecular gastronomy was a completely new field. It wasn't that it was wrong, but rather, it was like an untamed wilderness. Not many people had truly explored its full potential. Wanting to single-handedly develop a new culinary path was an incredibly difficult task. Alice Nakiri wasn't Yuki. She didn't have a system, so on this path, she was bound to gradually be overtaken by others. Following Yuki's suggestion, Alice had gradually shifted her focus to traditional cuisine, directly learning from Yuki. As for molecular gastronomy, she hadn't given up, but instead, was trying to find a balance,
allowing it to complement traditional cuisine. This approach further enhanced Alice Nakiri's culinary skills. Her talent was already exceptionally high at Polar Star, so after choosing this more suitable path, her improvement speed amazed everyone. Everyone also cooked some of the wild mushrooms they had collected. The taste was quite good. Wild mushrooms had a unique freshness to them. Only in the evening did everyone clean up and return to Shoki and Ryokan. At the Ryokan, they had access to more tools and equipment. As for the remaining wild mushrooms, those suitable for frying were deep-fried and preserved. This wild mushroom oil was an excellent topping for noodles. On their third day at the Ryokan, through Alice Nakiri's financial support, they chartered a fishing boat for a day trip out at sea. They planned to play on the boat, do some fishing, and even dive at suitable locations. For safety reasons, there were several diving instructors on board, and they even had top-notch equipment. It could only be said that with money power, getting these things was simply too easy. This also left everyone once again speechless. Megumi's original idea had been to find an acquaintance, get a good price, and take everyone out for a simple fishing trip, and then play on the beach. But with Alice Nakiri here, money power made everything easy. Looking at the boat captain, beaming from ear to ear, they knew he must have made a killing. And the grinning diving instructors also made a small fortune. As Alice put it, since we're out to have fun, we're here to spend money, and this small amount of money was less than a drop in the bucket for her. Yuki, aren't you going fishing? After the others prepared their fishing rods, they looked at Yuki with some curiosity. Yuki currently didn't seem to be in the mood for fishing. I'll pass. I have other methods, Yuki said with a smile, although there was something about that smile that made people feel strange. Megumi, what's wrong with Yuki? Yoshino Yuki quietly asked Megumi Tadakoro. After all, Megumi had spent the most time with Yuki. Alice Nakiri and the others also perked their ears. Well, before, Yuki and I went fishing quite a few times. Hearing Yoshino Yuki's question, Megumi Tadakoro's expression became a little subtle. Yuki was the closest to her and had even gotten along with her family members. During his holidays, Yuki would often visit Megumi. Before transmigrating, Yuki wasn't really into fishing, but he had heard about the woes of being a fisherman. So when Megumi first took him deep-sea fishing, a new world opened up to him. His catch that day had been quite impressive. The other experienced fishers on the boat at the time had been envious. But when they heard he was a beginner, they simply said it was beginner's luck. Yuki hadn't really cared much, but his subsequent fishing trips made him rather miserable. His fishing luck afterward had been cursed. Although he caught things, they were never fish. However, as an angler, it was impossible to simply give up just because of bad luck. Yuki himself even suspected that the system was somehow absorbing all his good luck as a fisherman. Today, Yuki had no intention of fishing. Actually, with his current abilities, creating a special kind of bait that could guarantee a huge haul wasn't a problem at all, but today, Yuki wanted to vent his pent-up resentment. After everyone else started fishing, Yuki also took out the things he prepared. 2 harpoons connected to ropes. Since he couldn't catch any fish with a rod, he might as well use a more direct method. He came up with this approach only after acquiring his supervision. Using this method to catch fish was very difficult. Only specialized fishing boats targeting tuna or swordfish would use this method. However, for Yuki, using this method was much easier than fishing with a rod. His supervision allowed him to clearly see everything within 100 meters below the surface. He could tell with just a glance if there were any fish or other creatures. And the strength control brought by Food Honor allowed him to throw harpoons with effortless precision. Although there was water resistance, with the help of Food Honor, that was no problem. While everyone else was busy fishing, Yuki, harpoon in hand, walked to the edge of the deck. Young man, catching fish like this isn't easy. Are you sure you don't want a fishing rod? Seeing this, the captain couldn't help but offer a reminder. Although his boat was for sea fishing, they usually caught regular fish and shrimp. So, he wasn't very optimistic about Yuki's method. Just glancing at the vast ocean, it was impossible to tell what was down below. The moment the captain finished speaking, Yuki hurled his harpoon. the harpoon shot out with incredible speed, plunging into the water. And because of Yuki's unique control, the harpoon's entry didn't cause a huge splash. In fact, there was barely any disturbance on the surface. Yuki's method minimized water resistance. After the harpoon went down over 20 meters, it directly pierced a large parrotfish. Seeing the harpoon hit its target, Yuki quickly pulled on the rope. If he were fishing with a rod, he wouldn't dare be so forceful. After all, fish were still pretty strong in the water. Too much force and the fish might escape the hook. But this was a harpoon, and the rope attached to it was also very thick. It was impossible for the fish to struggle free. Besides, after being pierced, the fish was already severely injured and had little strength to struggle. Soon, Yuki pulled up a huge parrotfish. He actually hit something. Seeing this, the captain, the crew members, and the diving instructors were all dumbfounded. No one expected Yuki could actually catch a fish this way. And this parrotfish was so big. Now I get why Yuki doesn't use a fishing rod. If I had this skill, I wouldn't bother with fishing rods either. Zenji Marui said, looking at his still motionless fishing rod. This method was simply too powerful. Anyway, it was the first time they had witnessed such a thing. As expected of Yuki, even this is a piece of cake for him. Alice Nakiri even dropped her own fishing rod and ran over to watch what Yuki was doing. Compared to the dullness of fishing, Yuki's method was way more interesting. Megumi Tadakoro, seeing this, also immediately followed. Although she was a kind and trusting soul, she also noticed Alice Nakiri's actions. She wasn't going to let Alice snatch Yuki away. "Yuki, can we try it?" Seeing Yuki detach the fish, Alice Nakiri asked eagerly. "Sure, there's another harpoon." "But actually hitting a fish isn't so easy," Yuki said. If it were others, he could guarantee that no one could replicate what he just did, not even those professional fishing boats that targeted tuna. Although those fishermen also used this method, they would choose stormy weather to go out to sea because only then would their targets come to the surface. They couldn't possibly hit fish with a harpoon through dozens of meters of water. After hearing Yuki, Alice Nakiri, ignoring his warning, tried to copy Yuki and threw her harpoon. However, the moment the harpoon made contact with the water's surface, a big splash erupted. The force of the harpoon was completely dissipated, and Alice's strength wasn't particularly great in the first place. So, the harpoon lost all its momentum before even fully entering the water and could only slowly sink downwards. This scene made everyone fall silent. After Yuki's godlike performance, Alice Nakiri's attempt looked downright pitiful. Ahem. Looks like it's not that simple. Yuki, you can do the honors. Alice, being thick-skinned, didn't seem the least bit embarrassed by her failure and just pulled the harpoon back. Judging from her expression, it seemed like nothing had happened at all. Such a mentality made everyone envious. If it were them, they would probably want to find a hole to crawl into right now. But looking at Alice, she was as calm as could be. Seeing this, Yuki couldn't help but smile. Then, he hurled another harpoon, this time bringing back a medium-sized moray eel. The moray eel continued to struggle even after it was pulled up. Except for Yuki, no one, not even the captain, dared to touch it. After all, being bitten by this thing wasn't something to look forward to. At best, you'd get some new holes in your hand, at worst, you'd lose a chunk of flesh. Yuki, ignoring these concerns, directly grabbed the moray and detached it from the harpoon before resuming his hunting. After that, all sorts of seafood were harpooned by Yuki, even a large lobster. Thanks to money power, the waters the captain brought them to were teeming with seafood. Yuki was also thankful this was a gourmet world. If it were the real world, even if he had such an ability, he wouldn't dare to do it this way, as who knew if these fish were contaminated. In this gourmet world, the ecological environment was still relatively well preserved. Yuki was now the center of attention on the boat. Seeing Yuki continuously exert himself, pulling all sorts of seafood from the sea, the other people who were fishing were all incredibly envious. But envy was envy, they simply didn't have Yuki's skill. They couldn't even see clearly what was in the water, let alone replicating Yuki's technique. Alice Nakiri's failed attempt was still fresh in their minds.
Chapter 77, Autumn Election Begins, Polar Stars Stage.
For the next few hours, Yuki was like a tireless machine, continuously hauling in all sorts of seafood. This stunned the captain and crew. Yuki's stamina was mind-boggling. They knew just how much strength throwing a harpoon and pulling it back with a fish attached would require, and also how much stamina such actions would consume.
Yuki could keep it up for several hours amazed them. Actually, they were only seeing the surface. Yuki's actual energy expenditure wasn't that high.
Thanks to food honor, Yuki barely used much strength when throwing the harpoon, same when pulling the fish up.
Moreover, Yuki's physique was quite good. That's why he could do it so effortlessly. After spending so much time fishing, Yuki hadn't really used up that much stamina. However, Yuki decided it was enough. He had caught more than enough already. If I had skills like that, whenever I went out to sea, all I'd need is a few harpoons and I'd come back with a boatload of fish. The captain was shocked by Yuki's performance, but he also knew he couldn't learn it. He was stuck at the first step, how to even clearly see the fish in the sea. After that, they moved to a more suitable location for diving. After suiting up with their equipment, and with the assistance of several diving instructors, they started their descent. The underwater world was truly beautiful, a sight to behold. Since diving consumes a lot of energy, after less than an hour, they decided it was time to head back. For the next few days, they explored places near Shoki and Ryokan. After they had their fill of fun, everyone returned home. Yuki returned to Polar Star to prepare for their upcoming plan.
Fumio Daimido, after learning about this plan, although she thought it was a good idea, also reminded Yuki not to push it if it wasn't working. It was the first time she'd heard of such a plan.
If it worked, then this year's autumn elections would become legendary.
But if it failed, it could backfire spectacularly.
With Yuki's culinary skills, even failing wouldn't have any impact on him.
But that wasn't the case for the others. Regarding this, Yuki stated that with his abilities, achieving such a plan was incredibly easy. However, he didn't intend to carry this plan on his own but have everyone contribute their specialties. He would then make further adjustments and plans based on the dishes they made.
This was also a pretty good experiment for Yuki.
10 days before the vacation ended, everyone returned to Polar Star and showed their results to Yuki. Thanks to Yuki's help, plus their own hard work, the dishes everyone prepared were all very good. Now, Yuki had to finalize the details of their plan based on these dishes. Incidentally, before the end of the vacation, Yuki had also obtained another large bait. This time, his fishing yielded the secret technique Arhat Crystal Slash, which was completely useless for the current Yuki. As for the small baits, his chances of catching anything good were even smaller. On average, he only caught a few useful ingredients a month.
Yuki was used to this by now.
While most of the time the small bait yielded useless junk, there were those rare occasions when he caught ingredients from the world of Toriko. So he pretty much had a continuous supply of top-notch ingredients.
Time flew by, and the autumn elections began on schedule. Students participating in the autumn elections gathered in the designated venue. Other students, and those from higher years, became spectators.
Actually, participating in the autumn elections had both its pros and cons. The advantage was that it was proof they were among the elites of this year at Tatsuki, and a chance to show off to the world. The disadvantage was that this public appearance could very well become an embarrassment. The grading standards of the autumn elections were the same every year. They naturally knew that most elites would only score around 20 or 30 points, based on international standards. Only a very few could score above 60. The current second and third year students were like this. The best among them barely reached 80. Most students' scores lingered around 30. So, most students participating now felt somewhat apprehensive. The probability of getting a high score was too low, they didn't dare be too confident. Naturally, the ones who got the most attention were those from Polar Star, especially Yuki, who was in Group B. His presence there was like a king playing in bronze rank. Having him participate in the autumn elections is practically a nightmare for the other students. Where the elite 10 members were located, looking at Yuki in Group B, the Elite 10 present all felt somewhat speechless. After all, Yuki was stronger than them, yet he was participating in a selection for Elite 10 candidates. There's nothing we can do about it. As long as they're not Elite 10 members themselves, they are eligible. This is an event related to Tatsuki's reputation, so they naturally have to include him. Eiichi Tsukasa shook his head helplessly. There was no need to apply for the autumn elections, all first-year students were included. Their job was to select students who met the standard. So even if they knew Yuki was ridiculously strong, they still had to let him participate. This cohort is really unlucky. Not only do they have Irina Nakiri constantly dominating them, but now there's the even more scary Yuki. What do you guys think the scores this year will be like? Rindo Kobayashi shook her head and asked. Scores? With this guy here, even a perfect score wouldn't be surprising. Taranori Kuga rolled his eyes. Unlike their two cohorts, where the highest score was around 80 points, and most Elite 10 members had scores in the 70s. This year's first years were different. This generation had many talents, and with a boss-level figure like Yuki around. Knowing Yuki as well as he did, Kuga would be surprised if Yuki didn't get a perfect score based on the autumn election standards. That's true. Yuki's too strong. The autumn election standards are brutal for other students, but for him, they're basically non-existent. Everyone nodded in agreement. They believed this autumn election was destined to be Yuki's solo performance. Little did they know, the Polar Star residents had a plan in place, ready to unveil their performance. As time passed, all the students were at their stations, and the judges were also in their places. However, what surprised Yuki somewhat was that Natsume Sendawara, who should have been at Group A, actually appeared in Group B. Yuki pretty much guessed that she appeared here because of him. As for Group A, it should be Ori Sendawara now. Yuki hadn't met Ori Sendawara last time, he only talked about the collaboration with Natsume Sendawara and then didn't bother with anything else, just waited to collect the money. Please, say a few words to start us off. After Natsume Sendawara sat down, Etsuya Aizen handed her the microphone. After all, her status was much higher than the other judges. Originally, he thought inviting these two would cost quite a bit, but unexpectedly, this invitation went incredibly smoothly. They agreed immediately, which was rather surprising to him. After taking the microphone, Natsume Sendawara immediately launched into some light-hearted mockery. This wasn't unusual, her status justified that level of sass. Well, although these competitions bore me a bit, having Yuki-kun here does make things interesting. I'm quite looking forward to his dish. At the end, Natsume Sendawara also specifically mentioned Yuki. This was her true thought, she was indeed only interested in Yuki, having already tasted his special seasonings before. She was certain that Yuki would surprise her again in this competition, and it was precisely because of Yuki that when Aizen asked her, she agreed without hesitation. Otherwise, even if she agreed before, she would have squeezed a hefty reward out of Aizen. Although Aizen was just a student, he was an Elite 10 member, after all, and he held quite a few of Tatsuki's resources. Upon hearing this, Etsuya Aizen finally understood why these two sisters had agreed so readily. They were here because of Yuki. The other students also collectively looked at Yuki. Clearly, among the students present, only Yuki was valued by her, which also made them very envious. But they also knew very well that it was only right for Yuki to have such treatment. Yuki was someone who had even defeated an Elite 10 member. The only reason Yuki would appear here was because Yuki wasn't an Elite 10 member himself. With Natsume Sendawara's words, and the host's announcement, the autumn elections officially began. All the students present began working, except for Yuki, who found a chair, sat down, and did nothing. This action also greatly puzzled everyone. They didn't know what Yuki was up to. The reason Yuki was doing nothing was that he was too fast. He needed to wait for the others this time. So, he'd just sit down and rest for a while, waiting for the other students cooking to reach a certain point before he started. Sometimes, being too fast wasn't a good thing. As time passed, aromas started to permeate the venue. After all, the theme this time involved using various spices, so the fragrance naturally couldn't be compared to that of ordinary dishes.
The aromas from the Polar Star residents' dishes weren't very strong. This was because they were planning a scent bomb attack. Only after the dishes were complete would the aroma be at its peak. At that time, the aroma would have already been sealed within the dishes. What the hell is that guy doing? Why is he still just sitting there? Irina Nakiri looked at Yuki with some confusion. Yuki's action of sitting motionless made her rather baffled. Not only her, but the other students and even the judges were also confused. Just as everyone was puzzled, Yuki, seeing the time was almost right, also started to move. At the same time, some students had already finished their dishes, but their results were quite disastrous. Although they had already spent an entire vacation preparing this dish, some had even used their family connections to get help from skilled chefs. In the end, the ones who had to cook were still themselves. So even with these people's help, their scores wouldn't be very high. After the first score was revealed, the scene fell silent. Although everyone had mentally prepared themselves, seeing this score still left them speechless. Because the score displayed was only in the 20s. Group A was slightly better, the first to finish there had a score of 33. But whether it was 30 or 20 points, these scores had already left everyone speechless. And the most important thing, they had thought this was already rock bottom, but unexpectedly, this score was actually considered average, even slightly above average. Because the students who followed continuously lowered the bar, from 20-something to 10-something points. An embarrassment even appeared with a single-digit score. The appearance of this fellow also dumbfounded all the students watching. Even the judges couldn't help but take a second look at this individual. Keep in mind, this competition gave students an entire month to prepare in advance, and those who had been selected to participate in the autumn elections were undoubtedly the top performers among the first years. Yet this guy managed to get a single-digit score. In a way, this was also quite incredible. Even the judges were speechless by him. Originally, they had wanted to say a few sarcastic remarks, but in the end, they held back. After all, this score was already more impactful than any sarcastic words. This student clearly made some operational error, and the remaining time didn't allow him to make another dish, so he could only accept his fate. After a bunch of super low scores, some capable ones finally appeared. Now Sadatsuka and the others from the original story, although they didn't have many scenes, they were at least elite-level students. The 60 students here were all elites among the first years, but there was still a considerable gap between elites. Most had scores around 20 or 30, but now Sadatsuka and the others could directly push their scores above 80. And after one person broke the ice, high scores in the 80s, and even above 90, appeared successively. This year's students are really something. The Polar Star kids haven't even shown up yet, and we've already seen such high scores. The Elite 10 were also very aware of Polar Star, they knew this group was the cream of the crop. But they never expected to see other surprises before these elites even took the stage. Much better than us, huh? Back then, the highest score in our year was also just in the 80s. Same with your year, Ishiki, right? Teranori Kuga said. In their two cohorts, 80 points was already the peak. But in this year's first-year cohort, 80 points was only considered elite. It could only be said that the quality of this jewel generation was really high. Chapter 78, A Perfectly Cyclical Dish, the tournament format changed by Yuki. Alright, everyone. Our turn. Seeing that others had also finished their dishes, Yuki led the way, carrying his dish to the stage. If not for waiting for the others, he would have been the first to finish. However, this was good news for the other students. If Yuki's dish were the first to be presented, there would be nothing left for them. As agreed, Yuki went first. His appearance naturally drew everyone's attention. Although other students' dishes were also quite impressive, Yuki was undoubtedly the most anticipated. Previously, everyone had been wondering why he just sat there doing nothing, making them very curious about what dish he had created. Yuki's dish was actually very simple: grilled fish. However, a special sauce was sealed within the fish to create a scent bomb. That's weird, why isn't there any aroma at all? The judges, looking at the grilled fish, were puzzled, not knowing what Yuki was doing. Yuki's dish isn't as simple as it looks. Natsum Sendawara knew just how powerful the seasonings Yuki had created before were, so there was no way he would mess up now. As expected of Ms. Sendawara. You'll understand the special aspect of this dish once you cut it open, Yuki said with a smile. For this grilled fish, Yuki sealed the sauce inside, then used Inferno's heat to create a sort of thermal film, completely trapping the aroma. The fragrance would only be released when the fish was cut open. Hearing this, the judges exchanged glances. They cut into the fish without hesitation, and the moment the fish was cut, a special sauce flowed out. And an incredibly enticing aroma swept across the entire arena like a storm. The fragrant smells of the dishes made by other students before were instantly overwhelmed by this overpowering aroma. Hiss. The judges, being closest, naturally got hit by this enticing fragrance. Just the smell alone made their mouths water. Fortunately, they were still able to control themselves. But the hostess standing nearby couldn't help it, she was practically drooling. As for the other spectators, they couldn't stop gulping either. This fragrance was simply too overpowering. He completely sealed the sauce within the fish itself. That's brilliant! After swallowing her saliva, Natsum Sendawara couldn't wait to taste it. After a bite, she exclaimed, "This is the best curry dish we've had in this whole competition, hands down. It deserves a perfect score. But, it also feels like something's missing. Like there's something more to this." After the judges tasted it, they showered Yuki's dish with praise, all awarding a perfect score of 20 points, giving Yuki a total of 100 points. A perfect score. We have a perfect score. This has to be the first perfect score in the autumn elections since the competition began. The audience roared with excitement. Although they had expected Yuki would get a perfect score, actually witnessing it was still impactful. What's missing will be added soon enough, but not by me, Yuki said with a smile before leaving the stage to the other Polar Star members. My turn. Prepare for the second wave of scent bombs. Alice Nakiri, carrying her dish, came before the judges and released the second wave of scent bombs. This aroma was completely different from the first but also complemented it. The two fragrances, perfectly blended, created a completely new scent, making the already rich and powerful aroma even more enticing. Only then did the judges understand why Yuki's dish felt incomplete and why Yuki had said the others would complete it. They were planning some kind of multi-part combination. This thought made the judges gasp. This kind of plan wasn't as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. After all, every chef's skill level, area of expertise, and cooking style were different. Making these individual dishes flow seamlessly together wasn't easy. Every additional person involved increased the difficulty exponentially. They now saw that Alice Nakiri's dish wasn't the end, that sense of incompleteness still lingered. Nevertheless, they gave another perfect score, 100 points. The second perfect score since Yuki's. As expected of a Nakiri. Even without the god tongue, still managed to pull off a perfect score. While Yuki receiving a perfect score was within expectations, Alice Nakiri's perfect score surprised everyone. This was completely unexpected. They couldn't help but marvel at the power of the Nakiri genes. The Nakiri family's newest generation had only 2 members, Irina Nakiri with the god's tongue. And although Alice Nakiri's brilliance was usually overshadowed, here, SHE also achieved a perfect score. However, the audience didn't know this yet, but this wasn't the end. Time for the third wave of scent bombs. Yoshino Yuki released the third wave of scent bombs, and with the 3 now blended, a new, even more complex, fragrance exploded forth. Without a doubt, this was another perfect score. The judges' expressions were increasingly amazed, as 3 people had already gone, and it still wasn't over. Next was Megumi Tadakoro's 4th wave, then Daigo Aoki's 5th, and finally, Shoji Sato's 6th wave. 6 consecutive scent bombs. And every wave created a new fragrance, these 6 dishes forming a continuous cycle of flavor. Although they could taste the different skill levels of the 6 chefs who created these dishes, these 6 dishes were clearly divided into 3 tiers. The first was Yuki's, undoubtedly the best.
Then there were Megumi Tadakoro, Alice Nakiri, and Yoshino Yuki. Although their skill levels were different, the gap wasn't huge. Finally, there were Daigo Aoki and Shoji Sato. If they ignored the combined effect and just judged the two individually, their dishes would have probably scored in the 80s. However, with the previous dishes leading the way, and with the overall combined cycle of flavors, their scores were boosted directly to the max. So, in the end, all 6 received a perfect score of 100 points. This completely silenced the audience. Am I still dreaming? 6 perfect scores? That's a new record. The students thought they were still asleep. Never mind them, even the professors were absolutely stunned. As for whether there was any foul play involved, that was impossible. The scores were given by these judges. These individuals wouldn't be so easily bribed. And as for Tatsuki itself bribing them, that was even more impossible. Tatsuki wouldn't damage its reputation for something like the autumn elections. So, these scores were the real deal, without any manipulation whatsoever. Check the school's online forum. Group A went crazy too. After a period of stunned silence, finally regaining their senses, students wanted to post about this online, but upon checking the forum, they found a post from spectators in Group A. A similar situation occurred in Group A, just one less person. 5 perfect scores. And the circumstances were identical. They're all from Polar Star. Are these people all this strong? Soon, people realized that all those with perfect scores were from Polar Star. No way. I'm in the same class as Daigo Aoki. He's good, but not that good. This has got to be Yuki's doing. He's the only one who could pull this off. Someone quickly figured it out. While Polar Star was known for housing strong students, it was impossible for every single one of them to get a perfect score. This was obviously something orchestrated by Yuki. After all, in many students' eyes, Yuki was a living legend. During the training camp, they had witnessed Yuki's extraordinary abilities. Considering how Yuki deliberately slowed down and waited for the others earlier. It had to be him. AS expected of Yuki. Making things even harder for himself. This autumn election is probably like watching toddlers play house to him. Everyone was lost for words when it came to Yuki. Wait a second. Isn't the autumn election preliminary round supposed to select only 8 students to advance? 4 from Group A and 4 from Group B, but what do we do now? Someone pointed out the problem. Originally, it was supposed to be the top 8. But now, 11 perfect scores. They couldn't just randomly eliminate 3 of them. 11 in the top 8? That's absurd. Never mind them, even the Elite 10 were in shock. After all, they were responsible for the autumn elections. And now, there were 11 identical perfect scores? Aishi, what do we do? Just let all of them advance? How are we going to handle the later rounds? Even the usually laid-back Rindo Kobayashi was stressed. Similar situations had happened during the autumn elections in the past, but it was usually just one extra person with the same score. This time, there were 3 extra, and what's more, all taken by Polar Star residents. Even Aishi Tsukasa had a headache. Yuki's actions had basically carried the entire Polar Star to victory. They stole the spotlight, but now the Elite 10 were under pressure. Just as Aishi was trying to come up with a solution, all the Elite 10 members' phones buzzed. Opening them up, every single one had received a message. It seems the director already has a solution. Just let the announcer know. After reading the message, Aishi Tsukasa said, "No need for us to do anything, Ishiki and Aizen are already on the move." Rindo Kobayashi noticed Tetsuya Aizen go directly on stage and find the host. And with Satoshi Ishiki being there, he would have also responded right away. After receiving information from the 2 Elite 10 members, the 2 hosts immediately announced the new format for the autumn elections. Due to the high frequency of top scores this time, Tatsuki decided to give more students a chance to showcase their skills, changing the top 8 to the top 16. Changing from top 8 to top 16, huh? now all 11 from Polar Star can make it, plus 5 more spots for other students.
It's not a bad solution, Taranori Koga commented. This way, they also gave other students an opportunity.
If all the slots had been taken by Polar Star, the blow to other students would have been too great. As Elite 10 members, they were clear that while the Polar Star students were skilled, it was impossible for all of them to get perfect scores.
This had to be Yuki's doing, only he could pull this off.
Polar Star single-handedly changed the format of the autumn elections. No, it was Yuki himself, he directly changed the entire competition format by himself.
Rindo Kobayashi said with a laugh. He's certainly incredible, but now we're the ones with a headache. One more round means additional work. We need more venues, more time slots, more judges. It looks like another all-nighter for us,
Eiichi Tsukasa said, looking dead inside. Hearing this, besides Rindo Kobayashi, the expressions of the other Elite 10 members also fell.
Yuki not only shocked them with his prowess but also effectively gifted them with overtime work.
But they had to do it, this was their job as Elite 10 members. If they wanted to enjoy the privileges that came with their position, they had to work. Among them, only Rindo Kobayashi could afford to not care. After all, even if Rindo didn't do anything, her work ultimately got done by Eiichi Tsukasa, so it wasn't like she was shirking her responsibilities entirely.
So the others couldn't say much.
In the end, all the Polar Star residents made it into the top 16.
The remaining 5 spots were taken by Akira Hayama, Subaru Mimasaka, Hisako Arado, Takumi Aldini, and Miyoko Hojo.
Originally, according to the original story, the last spot would have been uncertain, as Miyoko Hojo and Isami Aldini had the same score. But due to Miyoko Hojo joining the Chukariori RS and being taught by Yuki, Miyoko became somewhat stronger. Her score this time wasn't the original 87 points but 89, surpassing Isami Aldini. So, the final spot was taken by Miyoko Hojo. Chapter 79, an autumn election full of talent, the unlucky ones who ran into Yuki. This year's autumn election is absolutely crazy. Even after expanding the top competitors to 16, there were still 3 students with scores above 80 eliminated. In previous years, 80 points would have been enough to win. Unlike the students, the instructors were focusing on the 3 who had been eliminated. These 3 were Isami Aldini, 87 points, Ikumi Mito, 86 points, and Sadatsuka now, 84 points. These 3, in past autumn elections, would undoubtedly have had winning scores, but now, they didn't even make it into the top 16. This meant that, compared to past champions, this cohort had 19 students who were at or above champion level. This number was absolutely shocking. As expected of the generation called the Jewel Generation by the director. They are far more terrifying than even the Golden Age generation. Especially Yuki. Forget about students, even we instructors aren't sure we could beat him. The professors chatted amongst themselves. At this moment, at Group A's spectator seats, Jun Shiomi finally breathed a sigh of relief. Soma Yukihara and his group from Polar Star had snagged 5 of the top spots, even knocking Akira Hayama, with his score of 94, out of the top 8. And it was Akira's specialty field, too. As Akira Hayama's guardian, having spent so many years together, Jun Shiomi knew him very well and also how much effort he put in this time. Yet, the result was that he couldn't even make it into the top 8. Thankfully, in the end, they increased the number of spots, so Akira Hayama at least made it into the top 16. Although his next opponent would still be from Polar Star, he at least had an opportunity. Due to the change in competition format, the following rounds of the autumn elections were temporarily postponed. The Elite 10 needed to discuss what to do next and coordinate with the school. That night, at Polar Star Dormitory, everyone gathered. After all, Yuki's plan had been a resounding success, a celebration was in order. Fumio Daimito was beaming, Polar Star's performance had really dazzled everyone. The generation that surpassed even the Golden Age had truly arrived. Although they didn't have that many Elite 10 members yet, it was just a matter of time. Now then, don't get too cocky. After all, you only passed the preliminaries because Yuki carried you all. The rest of you are alright,
but Daigo and Shoji take note. Fumio Daimido said. Their own dormitory situation was clear to her. She wasn't worried about the others' culinary skills, but Daigo Aoki and Shoji Sato were different. Although their current skills weren't weak, they would inevitably be eliminated in the top 16. She didn't want to see them getting complacent and then failing later. Don't worry, Auntie Fumio. We know our own limits. Being in the top 16 is already more than enough for us. Daigo Aoki and Shoji Sato both had very good mentalities. They were clearly aware that with their talent, they couldn't have made it through the preliminaries. But with Yuki's help, obtaining such a high score, they understood it was only temporary. They constantly reminded themselves to remain humble, immediately extinguishing any hint of arrogance. In this aspect, Daigo and Shoji were indeed quite commendable. It's good that you understand that. The others too treat this competition seriously. Although there's a high probability you'll face each other, no matter whether your opponent is from our dorm or not, do not slack off. Fumio Daimido said. Everyone nodded in agreement. We will definitely give it our all, Auntie Fumio. Although, I'm more curious about who will face Yuki. Yoshino Yuki's expression turned a bit odd when she mentioned Yuki. Hearing this, others also made similar faces. Next was top 16, then top 8, semifinals, and the finals. That meant 4 people would have to face Yuki. Whoever those 4 were, they could be considered unlucky. Facing any other opponent, there was still a fight, but against Yuki, there was simply no suspense. Of course, this was just how most people thought. For Soma Yukihara and Ryo Korakiba, having the chance to challenge Yuki was a prize greater than any championship title. After all, they had never found an opportunity to challenge Yuki. It was incredibly difficult. Now, they had a chance. Some autumn election title meant nothing to them. Actually, facing Yuki had both positive and negative aspects. The positive was that losing was completely understandable, no need for excuses. For those who cared about face, losing to Yuki wasn't embarrassing. After all, it was losing to the champion. The negative aspect was that there was absolutely no chance of winning against Yuki. Only one outcome, certain defeat. We might also face Yuki, you know? Yuki, please don't hold back if you're against any of us. Ryoko Sakaki said. Yuki had never truly displayed his full culinary skills in front of everyone. How strong he truly was, no one knew for certain, they could only make estimations. Yeah. If you're against me, you better go all out, Yuki. Yoshino Yuki also quickly nodded. Hearing her say this, the others also agreed. They weren't afraid of losing, they just wanted to see Yuki's true culinary skills. Are you sure about that? Yuki glanced at everyone once again. Absolutely. You've already defeated Shinomiya Senpai, losing to you won't be a big deal at all, Alice Nakiri said with a smile. Everyone knew they would lose to Yuki. If they could make Yuki use his full strength, then even losing would be honorable. In that case, I'll do it. But don't be too shocked then. Yuki said with a smile. He had a very good relationship with the Polar Star residents, so this request wasn't difficult for him. He agreed. By the way, why hasn't Ishiki-senpai come back? When the celebration was halfway through, everyone suddenly remembered there was one person missing. Although Satoshi Ishiki was a year above them and hadn't participated in the autumn elections, he was still a member of Polar Star. He just told us earlier, because of us, they changed the format. They added matches, so they're rearranging the schedule, the venues, the judges, the Elite 10 are all busy working overtime. Soma Yukihara explained. It seemed like he wasn't so eager to become an Elite 10 member anymore. After all, being an Elite 10 member seemed to involve a lot of work, even overtime for unexpected circumstances like this. Like some advanced corporate slave. Learning that Satoshi Ishiki was working overtime, everyone didn't ask any further. For the next 2 days, the various work arrangements for the autumn elections were constantly being adjusted. It wasn't until the third day that the adjustments were complete.
The venues were still the same as for the preliminaries, and the judges invited were graduates. 2 matches would be held simultaneously, 4 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon. All 16 top 16 matches would be finished within 2 days. The subsequent matches would then proceed as originally planned. At this point, all 16 first-year students were gathered in the Elite 10 meeting room. Now, it was time for the draw. Besides drawing lots to see who their opponent would be, there was also the theme. The drawing results soon came out. Soma Yukihira drew his longtime rival from the original story, Takumi Eldini. Ryo Kurokiba drew Miyoko Hojo. Megumi Tadakoro faced Daigo Aoki. Shoji Sato faced Akira Hayama. Shunibu Saki faced Subaru Mimasaka. Zenji Marui faced Ryoko Sakaki. Yoshino Yuki faced Alice Nakiri. Finally, Yuki faced Hisako Arado. Hisako Arado's heart sank seeing the draw result. After all, she had drawn the last person she wanted to face, Yuki. If it were Takumi facing Yuki, he would only feel lucky. Although knowing he wasn't Yuki's match, he could still have a go. But Hisako was different. As Irina Nakiri's secretary, she felt she had to achieve at least second place to be worthy of her position. Precisely because of this, she had always set extremely strict standards for herself, yet now, from the very start, she had to face Yuki, an opponent she absolutely couldn't beat. This meant that she was destined to lose this time. With the numerous members from Polar Star, there were bound to be several internal battles. Megumi Tadakoro and Daigo Aoki. Zenji Marui and Ryoko Sakaki. Yoshino Yuki and Alice Nakiri. Everyone had been mentally prepared for this long ago. Even if it was against a dorm mate, they would give it their all. After the opponents were drawn, it was time to draw the theme. On Yuki and Hisako Arado's side, Yuki had Hisako do the draw. The resulting theme was sashimi. This dish was indeed very common in Japan. Although Yuki didn't often make such dishes, if he wanted to make it, there would be no problem for him at all. He happened to want to try using his freezing air ability. This theme wasn't particularly friendly to Hisako Arado. After all, her specialty was medicinal cuisine, and raw fish wasn't exactly conducive to integrating medicinal ingredients. Since everyone has drawn their opponents and themes, go back and prepare. Come back here to compete tomorrow. Seeing everyone finished with the draw, Eishi Tsukasa spoke. At this moment, he had huge dark circles around his eyes. Clearly, he hadn't slept much these past few days due to overtime work. Hisako, don't overthink it. Just do your best. Never mind you, even I have no chance of winning against Yuki. Irina Nakiri said. In this competition, Yuki was the final boss, whoever ran into him was screwed. So, she didn't have any specific requirements for Hisako Arado's results. Actually, Irina Nakiri always valued her little secretary and never demanded any specific achievements. Although Irina was quite demanding of her other subordinates, she wasn't like that with Hisako. Others approached her because of the connections and benefits from associating with the Nakiri family. Although this was also Hisako Arado's initial motivation, Hisako herself was extremely pure and sincere. Just as described in the original story, she was someone who served the flower that never changed. Irina Nakiri naturally also understood this. So, if others made mistakes, even if just once, she would abandon them. After all, Irina Nakiri didn't lack followers. But with Hisako Arado, it was different. Hisako was the person who understood her best and the one she cared about most. So no matter how many mistakes Hisako made, she would turn a blind eye. Of course, fundamental errors were out of the question, and Hisako herself never made such mistakes. I know, Irina-sama. I'm really unlucky this time. But no matter what, I'll do my best. Hisako Arado nodded. Losing to Yuki wasn't embarrassing. So, she didn't think much about it. Perhaps this was even a good thing. After all, Hisako Arado in the original story became very depressed after losing, only recovering under Soma Yukihira's guidance. So, this time, it also prevented Hisako from falling into such a state.
Another day passed, and the autumn election venue once again filled with students. To ensure the smooth running of the autumn elections, there would be no classes during this period, which could be considered a perk. They could all come watch the competition. Of course, they could also choose not to come, but for Totsuki students, it was impossible not to come to such a competition. Speaking of which, did anyone see anything weird outside the dorm last night? Shun Ibusaki couldn't help but ask on the way to the venue. Something outside the dorm? Yoshino Yuki and the others were taken aback. This was Totsuki Academy. While the area around Polar Star was forested, there weren't any wild animals. Don't even guess it was Ibusaki-kuen's opponent, Subaru Mimasaka. That guy is quite special, he can copy other people's dishes. Of course, this ability has certain prerequisites. He needs to track his target and thoroughly understand everything about his opponent. Yuki explained. The guy lurking outside last night was indeed Subaru Mimasaka. However, replicating Shun Ibusaki's dish this time would be difficult for him, the time was simply too short. Even if his tracking skills were amazing, it would still be impossible to completely replicate everything about Shun in just one night. Of course, replicating a portion of it wouldn't be a problem, but Shun Ibusaki had been trained and taught by Yuki for so long. The probability of Mimasaka beating Shun wasn't high. There's an ability like that? Everyone was shocked. They never imagined Subaru Mimasaka would possess such an ability. Replicating another chef's cooking just by tracking them was mind-boggling. Actually, referring to Subaru's ability as a special ability wasn't an exaggeration. Only a special ability could achieve something so outrageous. After arriving at the venue, everyone saw the burly Subaru Mimasaka. Their expressions turned a bit odd. It was hard to imagine that this hulking figure was actually a stalker, relying on tracking others to replicate their dishes. Chapter 80, Freezing Air and 7-Star Knives, Modified Fiery Ice Fresh Fish Mountain. Unfazed by the stares, Subaru Mimasaka simply ignored them. After all, that was the nature of his ability. Over the years, many of his tracking targets had discovered him. He even attracted the attention of many passers-by while tailing them. Subaru was long used to strange looks. The first and second matches were Soma Yukihira vs Takumi Aldini and Ryo Korakiba vs Miyoko Hojo, respectively. The final results, naturally, went without saying. Takumi and Miyoko were completely crushed. Soma and Ryo's culinary skills were already second only to Arina Nakiri in the original story, and now, having been further strengthened, even Akira Hayama couldn't defeat them, let alone Takumi and Miyoko. Although quite unhappy about his loss, Takumi conceded defeat. Miyoko Hojo didn't say much. While she was also competitive, she was still quite a ways off from Ryo Korakiba's level. The remaining two matches in the morning were Yoshino Yuki vs Alice Nakiri and Yuki vs Hisako Arado. Yuki's appearance naturally made him the center of attention. That's what happened when you were ridiculously good at cooking. Although everyone knew Yuki would inevitably win this match, it didn't dampen their interest in seeing what he'd make. Hisako Arado also knew she would definitely lose this match. With Irina Nakiri's words of encouragement, her mentality wasn't affected. Right now, she simply wanted to compete against Yuki. The ingredients for the subsequent matches were chosen by the competitors themselves. Yuki brought out a sea base. Sashimi made from sea base had a smooth, light, refreshing texture, which was perfectly suited for the dish Yuki was planning to make. Hisako, backed by Irina Nakiri, had no shortage of resources and directly brought out a piece of tuna, incredibly fresh. With a single glance, Yuki knew it had been butchered this very morning. While it might have seemed, at first glance, that Yuki was at a disadvantage in terms of ingredients, his knife skills were more than enough to compensate for this difference. After placing the fish down, Yuki directly took out his 7-star knives, unleashing the 7-star flash severing knife dance. In the blink of an eye, the sea base before him was prepped. By the time Yuki finished this step, Hisako Arado had only just taken out her own knife. When it came to ingredient processing and cooking speed, Yuki was the absolute best. However, what came next was the crucial step. When making fiery ice fresh fish mountain slices,
the North Star Wolf blade was ideally used. But Yuki didn't need that ice knife now, his 7-star knives would suffice. At this moment, a chilling air emanated from Yuki's hand, spreading rapidly along his 7-star knife. In the blink of an eye, under the effect of the freezing air special ability, the 7-star knife in Yuki's hand transformed into a knife similar to the North Star Wolf blade, and this chilled knife was reusable. It was the perfect time to use the Arhat Crystal Slash he had previously obtained. As Yuki used the Arhat Crystal Slash, his entire demeanor drastically shifted. To others, he now resembled a wrathful god. Just this aura alone could completely intimidate an opponent. Hisako Arado, just by glancing at Yuki, was startled, and her movements involuntarily stopped. This was the power of the Arhat Crystal Slash. Besides its powerful knife skills, the aura it exuded was also immensely intimidating. Under this pressure, opponents were easily affected. For example, right now, Hisako Arado, even with her exceptional culinary skills, could probably only perform at 80%, perhaps even less. The fish slices Yuki cut were like crystal shards, rapidly placed on the small ice mountain he had prepared beforehand. Because the slices were so incredibly thin, combined with the freezing air enveloping the 7-star knife, the fish slices, once placed on the ice mountain, seemed to vanish before their eyes. During the entire process of Yuki making the sashimi, the others didn't even dare to breathe. Only after Yuki stopped using the Arhat Crystal Slash did the venue gradually return to its previous state. The students in the audience seats also began to discuss. What was that just now? I thought I saw something terrifying. I was completely frozen. One student said, clearly shaken. He realized he had broken out in a cold sweat. It wasn't an illusion. Yuki-sama's state just now was very strange, as if we were looking at a wrathful god. One of the Chukariori RS members said. Although that aura was scary and strange, did you guys notice the fish slices he made? They were like mirrors. And after landing on the ice mountain, they just vanished. I can't even imagine what the texture of that sashimi would be like. Now that you mention it, I'm curious too. Those fish slices, placed on such a large ice mountain, so incredibly thin, shouldn't there be a problem with that? Everyone was now focused on the sashimi Yuki made. Although the slices were extremely thin, and he had even used freezing air on his knife when cutting, if it were anyone else, doing this would definitely freeze the fish slices solid, ruining the texture. But Yuki was different. He could precisely control freezing air. The freezing air formed a protective layer on the sashimi slices, ensuring the temperature remained optimal. Moreover, this freezing air also prevented frost from the ice mountain from affecting the sashimi. So, although these fish slices might look like they had been frozen and lost their texture, the actual texture was like that of fresh sea bass. The freezing effect on the exterior only served to preserve and enhance the flavor in texture. Besides that, Yuki also prepared a special dipping sauce. Yuki didn't know what sauce Leon used in the original dish, but with Spice Equation, he could naturally create the most suitable sauce for this dish. After Yuki completed his dish, Hisako Arado was still processing the tuna. Yuki didn't wait. Whether he waited or not wouldn't affect the result anyway. He presented his dish to the judges' table. This time, besides the two other graduates, Senzama Nakiri was also present. The judges for each match were different. But when it came to Yuki's match, the standard was much higher. Especially with Senzama Nakiri. Yuki participating in a competition like this, it wasn't appropriate for Senzaman to get involved in the preliminaries, but it was different for the subsequent matches. Senzaman Nakiri had already decided that, in the future, as long as it was Yuki's match, he would be there to act as a judge. As for the other judges, they were just there to make up the numbers. Yuki-kun, does this dish have a name? Looking at this incredibly beautiful dish, Senzaman Nakiri couldn't help but ask. Although this dish looked simple, the knife skill Yuki demonstrated already had immense value. Sashimi, besides the taste, the most important aspect was its texture, and the texture of sashimi was naturally related to the chef's knife skill. They had all just witnessed Yuki's actions. It would be impossible for sashimi sliced with such incredible knife skills to not taste good. As for whether the sashimi's texture had been ruined by the freezing, Senzaman Nakiri hadn't even considered that possibility. In his view, Yuki wouldn't make such a low-level mistake. The original name of this dish is Fiery Ice, Fresh Sea Bream Mountain, although now it's not sea bream but sea bass, so it should be called Fiery Ice, Fresh Sea Bass Mountain, Yuki replied. This could be considered a modified version of the original dish, using a different main ingredient.
What a great name! Then let me have a taste and see how it is. Senzaman Nakiri was incredibly curious about Yuki's cooking.
After all, every single one of Yuki's dishes, whether he had tasted them or not, were all excellent. As he took a slice of sashimi, dipped it in the sauce, and put it into his mouth, Senzaman Nakiri's eyes abruptly widened.
The next second, the upper half of his clothes exploded.
The two graduates next to him were both startled. Although they had always known about the Nakiri family's clothes burst tradition and had even seen it before, it was their first time experiencing it at such close range.
Such a vivid taste. It's as if the sea bass is still alive in my mouth.
Placed on the ice mountain for so long, such thin slices, yet it still maintains this fresh texture. And this sauce, a refreshing sensation bursts onto the palate, invigorating the mind. Combined with the refreshing taste of the sea bass, it's simply divine. Senzaman Nakiri's praises flowed endlessly. Of course, this didn't stop him from continuing to savor the dish. As for the two graduates on the side, seeing this, they only dared to taste one bite.
Afterwards, although they really wanted to eat more, they couldn't do anything so presumptuous in front of this food demon.
Just like that, Senzaman Nakiri finished the dish all by himself. Thankfully, the portion of this dish wasn't very large. The sea bass Yuki selected wasn't very big, and the part that could be directly sliced into sashimi was also only part of the fish body. With Senzaman Nakiri's appetite, eating such a small amount of fish meat wouldn't even make him feel remotely full.
The director's praise is so high.
It's rare to see him continuously praise someone like this. Among the Elite 10, seeing Senzaman's clothes burst and his continuous praises, they were all very envious of Yuki. To be able to receive such an evaluation from Senzaman was very enviable.
I'm really curious about the taste of this dish.
From what the director said, the texture wasn't affected by the freezing at all.
I wonder how he did it.
Compared to Senzaman Nakiri's reaction, Rindo Kobayashi, as a food lover, was more curious about the taste of this dish.
Unfortunately, she was destined not to taste this dish.
Yuki might make it for his Polar Star friends, but he certainly wouldn't make it for outsiders.
Hearing what Rindo said, the others were also very curious about what this dish's texture would be like. But unfortunately, they could only guess based on Senzaman's evaluation. After Yuki's dish was finished, a while later, Hisako Arado also completed her dish. She actually put some medicine in the dipping sauce. And without affecting the taste, it even neutralized the risks of eating raw fish. Yuki saw the secret in Hisako Arado's sauce at a glance.
One couldn't eat sashimi all the time, otherwise, even without parasites, the stomach and intestines couldn't bear it.
Hisako Arado's dish could also be considered a medicinal cuisine.
Undoubtedly, Hisako's dish was very good.
However, with Yuki's dish having already set the bar so high, the chance of subsequent dishes catching up was close to zero.
So, the final result was still Yuki winning. No one found this surprising, not even Hisako herself.
Although they knew the outcome, the process of the match was a feast for the audience's eyes. After all, they didn't get to see Yuki's secret techniques every day.
This hot crystal slash was the first time it had appeared in this world. With Yuki effortlessly winning this match, on the other side, Alice Nakiri undoubtedly won hers as well. Although Yoshino Yuki was also very strong, facing Alice Nakiri, there was still some gap.
In the afternoon's 4 matches, the winners were Megumi Tadakoro, Akira Hayama, Shane Busaki, and Zenji Marui.
Daigo Aoki encountered Megumi Tadakoro. The outcome was already a foregone conclusion. Although Shoji Sato had improved considerably, he was still no match for Akira Hayama, the original story's champion. On Shane Busaki's side, because Subaru Mimasaka's tracking time was too short, his understanding of Shun wasn't deep enough. In the end, Shun defeated him before he could properly use his ability.
Lastly, Zenji Marui narrowly defeated Ryoko Sakaki. At that time, the judges had struggled for quite a while to decide between the two before finally declaring Zenji the winner. After the 8 matches ended, the remaining 8 people were once again gathered together. Next, they would draw lots to determine their next opponents and themes. Everyone was already participating for the second time, they were naturally familiar with the procedure and quickly determined their respective opponents. Soma Yukihira faced Zenji Marui. Megumi Tadakoro faced Akira Hayama. Yuki faced Shun Ibusaki. And Ryo Kurokiba faced Alice Nakiri. Among the 8 people, 7 were from Polar Star, resulting in 3 internal battles. As for Akira Hayama, after encountering Megumi, Yuki also knew Akira's autumn election journey would end here. After all, Megumi Tadakoro's culinary skills were firmly in third place within Polar Star. First was Yuki, second was Satoshi Ishiki, and third was Megumi. Facing off against the current Megumi Tadakoro, unless Megumi made a major mistake, Yuki didn't think Akira could win. As for the other matches, his own match went without saying, he would definitely win. Soma Yukihira facing Zenji Marui would certainly also result in Soma winning. But Ryo Kurokiba versus Alice Nakiri was a bit different. Originally, Ryo Kurokiba should have been stronger than Alice Nakiri. But now, Alice had found a new path, and because she often stayed by Yuki's side, she had received more guidance from Yuki than Ryo had. This led to Alice gradually catching up. Now, the two were more or less evenly matched. Even Yuki couldn't predict who would win. That wraps up this part of What If Fishing System in Food Wars World. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.